Most of the hard work is done now, and we have the fun of throwing our loops together in GarageBand and learning a few little tips and tricks to make them work together well. So we're going to get straight into it. In GarageBand you can open up a new template. It doesn't really matter which one it is, so I'm just going to choose the first one, piano, and I'm going to call this Test Remix. Now before you go out of this first new project window, just go down to the bottom and check that you've got the right key signature. If you've been downloading things that are all in 3/4, for instance, for your loops, 4/4 ain't going to be very good. Choose a tempo which sits somewhere in the middle of the range of your different loops. So if you've been downloading lots of extremely fast drum and bass and some very slow blues, you're probably not going to have a lot of luck at fitting that stuff together. But hopefully it's all within, say, 20 to 40 beats per minute of one another, and I know that the bass and the drums, which you saw in the last video, are around the 90 mark. Some of my other stuff is around the 110 mark, so I'm going to go for, say, 101 because I don't like having around 100 beats per minute. If you don't know what the key is, it doesn't really matter. You could go for just the major or minor feel, and of course it's very unlikely that all of your loops are going to be in the same key. So if you do know what key, if you've managed to work out what key they're in, go for a key which is, again, in the middle range. The more that you transpose the tempo and the pitch of the music, the more unnatural it's going to sound, because GarageBand has got to change it a lot. So I'm going to go for G minor, which is actually the original key of the bass line that we saw in the last one. And I'm going to click Create, and GarageBand will set up a new file. Now I chose the piano template, so I've got a grand piano in there, but I don't need it, so I'll just delete that track with Command and Delete. And I'm pretty much ready to go. Now, I showed you before that I'd put all of my loops in here. If I want to, I can actually drag them all here into the loop browser. But in this particular case, I'm just going to drag them straight into the window and start working with them. So I'm going to start off with that very bass line. I'm going to drag that in here, right into bar 1, so it's going right from the start. And if I play that, you'll immediately hear the bass line that you know. Alright, so next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop that out. I want to use those 4 bars over and over again. So to do that, I simply move the mouse pointer to the top right hand corner of the loop and then just drag it off to the right. And I can just keep pulling that as far as I like, forever if I particularly wanted to. So to get to the EQ, what we're going to do is double click on this track, and you can see here now that it's opened up various different effects that are available to us. Now if I click on some of these now, they're going to use a whole load of presets, but if I click on the edit button, I can go in and actually take control of those things for myself right now. So what I want to do is to actually choose a little bit of the EQ. You can see it's actually already inserted, but it's not on. This button turns it on, and this button here allows me to actually see it. Now if you haven't used EQ before, I'm not going to give a complex explanation of what it is here, but basically your low frequencies are at this end and your high frequencies at this end, and by moving things up and down you can hear more of high, medium and low pitches or frequencies. So if I start that playing, you can hear that there's some fairly loud hiss. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag up the high mid, which I think is going to give me a fairly good idea of where the high mid is, and when I play in a second I'm going to drag that left and right, and you'll hear that hiss being identified to the exact pitch of where it is. So just have a listen to this. Now there's no perfect way of doing EQ, you can just trust your ears. You can see that I'm trying to take some of the hiss out of that track, but as a result I'm dulling the sound of the Rhodes bass line because I'm taking a lot of the interesting harmonics out of the recording. So I can't really win. The more of the hiss that I take away, the more of the tone of the original instrument that I take away. But you can play around with those things with your ear, and another good way of knowing whether you've done some good is to press play and then turn it off and on and compare the difference that you've actually made with the settings that you've come up with. So something like this. So that's a pretty good setting because it's not altering the tone too much and it's getting rid of a lot of hiss. Okay, so we've now got our Fender bass sounding pretty good. Now we want to drop our drum loop over the top. So let's just go back to the Finder. I'm going to find my drum beat and I'm going to drop it in. I don't want to introduce all of my instruments at once. It's more interesting if I layer them in. So I'm going to drop the drum pattern in at bar 5. Okay, and again, I'm just going to use the mouse pointer at the top right hand corner of the loop and pull it out so that it repeats over and over again. That's good. Now let's hear what it sounds like when the drums come in. Sounds great, doesn't it? You will notice that drum parts, it's fairly unusual to have a drum part which is exactly the same every bar, and were I taking a little bit longer about this process rather than just doing it as a demonstration, I would certainly have what we would call fill bars every 4th bar or every 8th bar. So that's a bar which has got a certain amount of variation to it, maybe some extra notes in, that's why we call it a fill, and it creates a little bit more interest, but it also creates a bit more excitement towards the end of phrases. Quite often phrases in popular music are 4, 8 or 16 bars long. Alright, let's add one more in this video and then we're going to go into a second video to look at the last instruments. So now we're going to add in what we call the carrot or the carrot linnet, which is basically a hollowed out carrot that I was able to find a video of on YouTube, and it has been it's been played with a clarinet reed, so it sort of gets a sort of clarinet-y Eastern kind of sound to it. Now, when we first put this in, even though I've already correctly identified the key, and so it should transpose quite well, it's going to sound a little bit funny. So just prepare yourself for something a bit weird for a second. So what is it that sounds a little bit weird? Well, it's still a little bit flat, even though it's transposed. All of the intonation, being a drilled out carrot, isn't completely perfect. It sounds a little bit odd. So we can use a good GarageBand trick here. If we double click on it, we open up the audio region browser down the bottom, and we can actually slide up the enhanced tuning slider here. It's something that's used a lot by TubeBand et al. To make sure their voices are in tune, and immediately that's going to just nudge the pitches in this part more in tune. Let's have a quick listen. Alright, that's sounding pretty exciting. Another thing we might do is put some effects on that. So if we go back over to the right again and click on the edit key, we can put, say, some compression on it to make it sound nice and close. And the other thing that I might do is turn on some echo. It's already sounding pretty exotic, this instrument, but let's actually just put some echo on it. It's going to make it sound really sort of distant and strange. Alright, I'm not completely sure I needed that compression. Might turn that off. But there you go, you can hear the echo is making a very interesting thing. Now again, I can loop that out. Now, in the next video, you're going to see how first I make harmony lines with this carrot instrument, and also how I can make the trumpet parts fit with what the carrot is doing as well. So that's in the next video.